Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Harry Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. Coming back here with Jerry McKinnon of the Tigers Minor League Report. Jerry, I wanted to talk about the next few guys in the draft, if you have anything on them, because I thought it was interesting. One of the things I wanted to mention about the draft as a whole that Joe highlighted in his article on TigersMinorLeagueReport.com was I thought an interesting strategy, because obviously how they do it in baseball is a little bit different than the other sports as far as paying these draftees. And it sounds like they had developed a little bit of a strategy here that I'm curious about your thoughts on, that they said, okay, these guys might be ranked a little bit lower, but we know these rankings are a little bit fluid, as we talked about at the beginning of the interview. But it was the idea that they could get these guys below slot because they didn't necessarily expect to go first round. So then you save a little money there, and then that has a compounding effect as you go later in the draft, maybe take a couple swings at guys that are high schoolers that are going to want a little bit more on their bonus and for signing. I'm curious on your take on that, because that seems like an interesting strategy, and the Tigers are good at kind of trying to find the advantages in the system. That's one of the things that I really like about the current regime, both from the management standpoint and the coaching standpoint.
Really, really like that idea as a strategy, because it allows you to get good talent in the first 10 rounds, but also grab the guys who might command more money and might have, as it were, signability issues because they want to go to college. Guys like River Hamilton, he's the one they took in the 11th round, and it was possible he was going to command quite a bit of money. He was headed to LSU. You don't really want to draft him in the first 10 rounds because you run the risk of losing that slot money in your whole pool. But if you take him in round 11, you take some guys that you can sign at a lower slot, then you can shift that money down to him and still have the chance to sign him away from LSU. It's a gamble because you never know if these guys are going to fall all that way, and you still run the risk of not losing on a player that you drafted, but it's a great way to accumulate some talent if you can get that to work.
Well, especially when the draft is all about trying to find that competitive advantage. You're trying to find that player that maybe is a little bit undervalued, trying to find that player that could be improved. I thought that was an interesting part of one of the pitchers that they drafted, Witherspoon. In the write-up on Minor League Report, you guys were talking about how, and I could totally see this with the Tigers because I feel like this is a huge narrative for them. It's a narrative overall in the major leagues, but they talk a lot about pitch shape, and obviously their coaching staff is elite, and you got to depend on those guys being able to improve people. But I found it interesting that they went after a guy that, hey, he might need some adjustments, as everybody probably does at that age, especially if they're not an elite talent and top of the line. But they were talking about being able to improve their pitch shape. So if you're getting a value on somebody like that, improving a couple of his pitches, then now you found value there, and you use that slot value to get some value later on, like you talked about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And Witherspoon is a perfect example of the upside that they were aiming for there too. His fastball is touching 99. He had a slider and a curveball that were hitting 2,800 RPMs, which is incredible. So there's stuff there, and they are looking at it with him being a college arm. He's not going to require quite as much refinement as maybe a high school arm, but the stuff is really good. So they could draft him, maybe try to get him a little bit lower, which I think it was reported he signed for his slot deal. But not going over is just as important as going under, so that way you're not trying to spend more money there. But he's got some really good stuff, and he could make for a fun project that we could see fly through the system if all goes according to plan.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And the last guy I wanted to talk about from the draft, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about him, because it was one of the narratives that we established before the draft. I'm impressed by how many narratives we hit on from the minor league preview. You guys were driving a lot of that, obviously, but there was the pitcher Lays that got taken, and I think it was Jaden. Somebody brought up the fact that they might look for people that have already had Tommy John surgery, because at this point, it's somewhat of an inevitability for these young guys. So if they're coming off of it and recovering, then you're maybe viewing them at their low, but now the sky's the limit and their arm is healthy again. So you're getting a guy that's undervalued because what you saw wasn't his peak potential, but you also don't have to wait out Tommy John surgery like you're doing for Jackson Jobe right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic point. Yeah, when they've had it done, it's already there. So what you see is probably not going to be their best stuff. You're spot on. They actually in the 17th round took Joey Wimpelberg. He actually had Tommy John surgery. It looked like about 2 months ago from some videos that I had seen of him rehabbing. So that's another one that kind of fits that narrative. It's, they took him later too, so they could probably get him pretty cheap if he wanted to sign, and he's already had it done. So now what you see is it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant attempt at competitive advantage, because then you don't have to risk. It's like Job. He's obviously on his way up. They didn't have to sign him to a second contract or anything, but you do have those situations where you sign guys and then now it's time for their Tommy John surgery and you're waiting out contract years that are being paid at a lot higher in order to retain that pitcher who's been very good, and you want to retain him, but that math and that timing doesn't work out quite as well as like, okay, he's going to be in our system anyways. We're not ready to bring him up to the major league roster as a guy that was drafted in the teen rounds this year. We're not expecting him up anytime soon. Let's let him heal. Let's be part of his recovery so that we can help him be his best self after the recovery. And that seems to be a brilliant idea, in my opinion, because then you can be part of the recovery and make sure to get help for him, but also improve what you need to as he's kind of reworking into his form. You can be part of that rather than he's reworked his form a little bit. Now you got to rework it again once he gets into the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their doctors can get right into it right away and say, hey, this is what we want to see. This is how we think we should do it, and let's follow this schedule here.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And the draft process, talking it through with you guys, has been very interesting. Obviously, there's going to be a long time till we see these guys, but it's still interesting to talk about the strategy. But I wanted to try to talk about the minor leagues, but we talk about those a decent amount usually. So the one question I want to ask you before we get you out of here is I'm curious about the Tigers are in an interesting spot. They've got a great division lead right now. They're rolling. They're doing better than whatever the highest expectation was at the beginning of the year, even with people that were bullish on them after the playoff run last year. They have legitimate World Series capability here, but they have had some injuries. They've been scuffling a little bit lately. I'm curious what you think they could do with the trade deadline here, because last year we had this discussion with some of you guys from the minor league report, and a lot of it was focused on selling at that point in time, which they did, and then they had the weird year where it all turned around. But now this year, I'm curious what they're going to do, because obviously they're not going to sell. They're going to be in a buying mode or just holding steady. But they do have some injuries, and they do have pieces that they could trade in order to do that. So I'm curious if you see them adding anything, and if so, what that is.
I definitely think they are going to add to the bullpen. They've really kind of taxed the bullpen a bit early in the season. You see a lot of guys are really tired, like Canely, like his last few outings have been a little rough. I think with Troy Melton getting the call up for Wednesday's start, that might change their ideas for the trade deadline, depending on how he does. because he's coming up with an electric fastball and multiple pitches that just generate a ton of whiffs. So they could potentially bring him up, let him start, see how he does, and then he could be the bullpen weapon that they're looking for. I would like to see them still get another arm, maybe even a second one, just in case. Some guys that really can strike guys out from the bullpen. I know a lot of people are really clamoring for Eugenio Suarez from the Diamondbacks to play third base. I know they've been linked to Brian Harris. He's a personal favorite of mine, although not many people agree with that. But I could see them also grabbing a bat just to try to solidify some of these spots that they're playing a few different guys and utility guys to try to bring in more of that offense that they had early in the season that is kind of lacking a little bit lately.
Yeah, Suarez is an interesting one because he was on the team obviously before. He's got great power, and so it'll be interesting to see his trade value is very high right now. So that's one of the things that I wouldn't be as interested in. But good player for sure. But yeah, great stuff. Appreciate you taking us through that. Tell the people where they can follow you guys here.
Yeah, no problem. I'm on most of the social media out there, like OPSenheimer, like you had mentioned earlier. Tiger ML Report on Twitter. We're always trying to post articles and videos and little screen grabs and put fun nuggets out there for the minor leagues and some of the stuff for the major leagues team when we see some good stuff. Yeah, follow us all over the place.
Yeah, definitely follow these guys. A lot of good information. Appreciate you joining the show, Jerry, and we'll look forward to having you back on here again at some point.
That sounds great. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Take care.
Mm-hmm. You too.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.